Okay.
Mookie!
So you know I'm still sick.
What?
How come you got no brothers up on the wall?
Man, ask Sal, right?
Hey, Sal, how come you got no brothers up on the wall here?
You want brothers on the wall? Get your own place. You can do what you want to do. You can put your brothers and uncles and nieces and nephews, your stepfather, stepmother, whoever you want, you see? But this is my pizzeria. American Italians on the wall only.
Do the Right Thing is a film that came out in 1989 that's written and directed by Spike Lee. So, Do the Right Thing is a $20 Criterion patron pick from The Oncoming Storm. This is one of 3 of patron picks from The Oncoming Storm. I've already reviewed Thief. Now I'm reviewing Do the Right Thing. The only one that I got left now is True Stories, and I'm really excited for that one as well. Out of all the Criterion patron picks, Do the Right Thing was very high up there in the films that I was most excited to watch and review. Because Do the Right Thing is a film that I've heard so much about for so many years. This is a film that a lot of y'all out there have requested to me, really pushing it and saying, hey, if you're really trying to get into Spike Lee as a filmmaker, Do the Right Thing is the essential Spike Lee film. Most people consider it to be the greatest film that he's made so far. And now after watching Do the Right Thing for myself, I have to say I 100% agree with everybody out there who says that this is their favorite Spike Lee film and his greatest work that he's ever done. Obviously I haven't seen that many Spike Lee films. I've seen maybe 4 or 5 at this point. But just from that batch that I have seen, this far surpasses anything that I've seen from him. This film is incredible. There are so many elements about this film that I just find to be incredibly compelling and just fantastic filmmaking overall. The first element of this film that I have to mention and discuss because I just found it so incredibly impressive is that the vast majority of this film, and I noticed this about halfway into this film, that the vast majority of this film, I'm talking at the very least 80% of this film, is literally just character interactions. The actual storyline of this film is incredibly minimal. And the fact that Spike Lee was able to write in so many different characters into the script and find a way to organize everything between all these characters, because there are a lot of different characters in this film, but the fact that he was able to organize the film in this way without really having much of a storyline for the audience to get latched onto, but still being able to maintain engagement and be so entertaining is such an accomplishment. Because it got to the point where I realized I could watch all these characters interact for days and not even care if it went anywhere. And it's mostly effective and entertaining because of the fact that this film is just dripping with personality, both in the screenplay and also behind the camera. There is so much style going on behind the camera in this film. Everything from how the camera is moving throughout the film, how the camera is positioned, how the film is edited together, how the film is paced. I mean, there is so much personality going on, and I think that really helped elevate the experience of this film because all the stylistic choices have so much intention behind them, and they're all very effective in what it's going for. I noticed in terms of camera positions, there's a lot of uses of Dutch angles to where the camera position is slightly tilted. And personally, I thought that was an effective stylistic choice because the tilt of the camera kind of enhances the idea that their mental state and their attitude is a bit skewed and they're not necessarily thinking straight because of the fact that, yes, there is tension in the air all the time in this Brooklyn neighborhood, but it's also being amplified by the heat. And I also enjoyed that stylistic choice as well because it just shows you how something as simple as the weather can make people feel even more on edge and feel even more aggressive than they were previously. And it's just because there's something about human beings being uncomfortable due to the heat just makes them more unreasonable, just makes them less patient. And I just think it's an excellent choice in screenwriting because it really does show you how a factor like the weather can actually have a huge influence on certain things that happen in life. I mean, the heat in this film plays a huge factor in sparking this explosion of emotions. And I'll definitely touch a bit more on that later, but Spike Lee's ability to also express the notion of heat in this film, I think was really effective because, as a filmmaker, you really have to do your best to express to the audience that all these characters are truly feeling the heat. And he's able to do this by making all the characters sweaty all the damn time, having a huge emphasis on water throughout the film, whether it's through the fire hydrant or, characters being refreshed by water, whether in the shower or sticking their entire face in a tub of ice water. And also in the color palette, as you see in the shot behind me, I think that the emphasis of red in this film, again, through the color scheme is able to give the audience that sense of the temperature, which is obviously incredibly hot. And another thing that I just really loved about this film is that there are so many memorable scenes here. And a lot of it, again, has to do with the stylistic use of the camera and the screenwriting. I mean, there's this one scene with the character Radio Raheem where, he has the brass knuckles that both say hate and love. And the way the camera kind of swoops in front of him and he's staring right at the camera is this interesting fourth wall break, but not really breaking the fourth wall because he's talking directly to Mookie, which is Spike Lee's character. But it gives the audience the sense that Radio Raheem is directly talking to them. And I just think it's a really creative stylistic choice that enhances the scene alone. I mean, the screenwriting of that scene is really great because he's talking about, the back and forth battle between hate and love and how they contradict each other, but they can't exist without each other. But, the way that Spike Lee utilizes the camera there, I definitely think enhanced the scene and made it even more memorable. And another amazing scene that we get in this film, and is probably my favorite scene in the entire film, is this incredible scene that we get between Danny Aiello's character and his son John Turturro. His name's Pino in the film. But I love that scene to death because it expresses a crucial character interaction in the film. Because John Turturro's character is extremely racist in the film. He's prejudiced in the most insane degree just from all the shit that he says. But his father, in the most calm and reasonable way, is doing his best to combat that line of thinking and is, trying to explain to him the value of the people that live in this neighborhood and, the value of his work and his pizzeria that he's built. And what enhances the scene and makes it feel that much more effective and authentic is the fact that it's all done in one take. The camera, begins a bit far away and then just kind of slowly pushes towards the characters. And it just makes it feel that much more impactful and that much more real. And it's also just really impressive from a directing and acting standpoint because there's a lot of lines delivered and a lot of emotions that need to be conveyed in that scene. And, everybody just really knocks it out of the park. And I just think it's such an effective scene that, gives us a lot of insight into these characters. Danny Aiello's character, by the way, he is an excellent character. I think he's brilliantly written. Very well acted. He might be my favorite character in the entire film. But it's a great scene that kind of just goes to show you that hatred and racism is not something that can really be fixed with reason. It's not something that, somebody could have the wisest words in the world, but, it's not gonna cure the hate that someone has in their heart. A lot of the times that can only be fixed with experience, like some sort of profound experience that particular person has is really the only hope that they would have to kind of get out of that hateful mindset. But another thing about this film that I absolutely loved is that a lot of the characters in this film, pretty much all the characters in this film, have a lot of anger inside them and they're frustrated with every fiber of their core and they all feel that they're being wronged by another race. And there's a lot of actions that happen in this film. And the film, because Spike Lee just was able to present this and write this incredibly well, makes it to where even though you don't agree with their actions, you completely understand where everybody's anger and frustration is coming from. And a lot of this anger and this tension comes from a conflict that's established early on in the first act of the film. And this particular conflict, at first, and for the longest time in this film, doesn't seem like it's going to lead to anything big. For the most part, it really seems to kind of fizzle out, but then it leads to something that is so frustrating and tragic in the third act. It builds and builds and builds into something that leads to, again, as I mentioned earlier, just an explosion of rage, an explosion of emotions that is really difficult to watch. I mean, it's pretty fucking heartbreaking and tragic. And it's heartbreaking for a lot of different reasons. One of them being the fact that it's still so unfortunately relevant. Like in terms of the racial disparity and the corruption, racism within the institution of law enforcement it's almost insane to see how the problems that are explored here in the film that came out in 1989 is still such a gigantic problem. Only seems to honestly have gotten worse and snowballed into something that we still see today. I mean, in recent memory with victims like George Floyd and victims like Eric Gardner, to see what unfolds in the third act of this film, it just breaks your heart, because these are problems that we are still facing today, and it seems almost worse. And the reactions to these problems and the reactions to these disparities is also something that is just incredibly frustrating. But again, this film does an excellent job at expressing where all these characters are coming from. It's one of those situations to where you can really understand the anger that everybody felt. And of course, this is a film that is gonna spark a lot of different interpretations from people, and people are gonna point the fingers in certain directions. But all in all, I do feel like one of the main goals of this film was to kind of allow everybody to understand where everybody's coming from. And it's awful because it just leads to less compassion. Spike Lee's character, Mookie, has a final interaction with Danny Aiello's character, the owner of the pizzeria, and their interaction was, again, just, it's hard to describe it with any other word except for incredibly frustrating, because it's just, there seems to be more of a lack of compassion than there was before. When you think things are getting better, it just somehow nosedives into something that now seems like everybody is more divided than ever. In terms of criticism, I do have a few things to say. Rosie Perez is in this film, and she's great when she's in it, but the thing is, she's hardly in this movie, and when Spike Lee does give her a scene, like a more drawn out scene, it just comes off like an uncomfortable, horny jail scene that doesn't feel like it needs to even be there. And I guess there could be an excuse to be made that, again, it's just trying to further express the notion of heat in the film. But at the same time, it just feels like she's barely in the movie, and then when she's in it, you just kind of have her for a sexual scene, and overall just didn't really work all the way for me. And also there's a scene between Spike Lee's character Mookie and John Turturro's character Pino, where, Spike Lee has this session to where he's kind of, preaching and schooling to John Turturro's character about his own hypocrisy, because, John Turturro is, is very transparent about his disdain for black people. And, Spike Lee's character kind of pulls him to the side and kind of exposes his hypocrisy by pointing out that all the idols that he looks up to are black. And, it's not that a scene like that couldn't work in the movie, but the way that it was kind of presented in the film didn't really feel all that natural. It felt like it was just kind of forced in there in that particular moment. And that's really all I have to say in terms of criticisms. I mean, obviously, the strengths of this film vastly outweigh its weaknesses, because there really aren't much there. And overall, just, damn, I was really, really impressed by this film. I mean, from every standpoint I could look at, I mean, the direction, again, as I mentioned, has a lot of style and personality to it, and I just feel like it really elevated the experience. From a screenwriting standpoint, again, very impressive that he was able to make this film incredibly engaging through mostly just character interactions. Again, not much story here. I mean, there is a conflict that leads to something big in the third act, but for the most part, this film is carried by the character interactions, and that's just very impressive. So I'm going to give Do the Right Thing a soft 9 out of 10. We got to fight the powers that be. Fight the power. Well, there it is. I can't believe I finally watched and reviewed it, because it's been a long time coming, and I wasn't disappointed. This is a fantastic film. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend to watch it. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Spike Lee just really balls out with this one. But that's all I gotta say about Do the Right Thing. If you really enjoyed what I had to say about the film, just give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.